Well, today on Scroll Sessions, we've got Logan Mallory. You're a husband, dad of 4 kids.
4 kids.
Been in the marketing industry for over 10 years in various roles and capacities. Keynote speaker, former adjunct professor at BYU, Marriott School of Business, 2023 Utah Business 40 Under 40. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
40 in their 40s, I think is what it is. And the current VP of marketing at Motivosity.
I'm all sorts of things, I guess. Maybe
Yeah.
from that list, I should slow down.
No, I love it. It's very that's like what I would aspire to be in about 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
Like I absolutely love it. I feel you in a lot of different things that you've accomplished in your career.
You're on the right path. You're sitting here running a podcast. You're on the right path.
I hope so.
You're in a good place.
I hope so. Well, when we first met, we've been connected on LinkedIn, but when we met in person, you said something that really stuck out to me. You introduced yourself. We kind of chatted. We were at this lunch and learn.
Sure.
And I came up, introduced myself, shook your hand, and you literally said, "What is your biggest problem right now, and how can I help?"
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And that just literally has completely it shook me and then has stuck with me ever since. Talk to me about that.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad that helped, and I hope that felt sincere because
It did.
It
It really did.
Those interactions are always really interesting. You're meeting new people. They're mildly familiar. We're all a part of the same community.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think we just don't know where to go or what to say, and we want to help, but we're not sure how. And so for me, I just that's one of the things I think about. What are you struggling with? What's miserable for you? What are you trying to push through? And if nothing else, maybe it shows some sincerity and lets you know you're not alone. Maybe I know someone that you want to know. Maybe I've solved that problem before. Maybe I can get you to think about it a little bit differently so it doesn't feel like such a big problem.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I don't walk around thinking that's the question to ask everyone. But I often find that when I ask a question like that, it opens up a conversation. And it does go a lot further than where are you from? Right?
Yes, totally.
We're gonna talk about where are you from, and then we're gonna see if we know anybody in common.
Yeah.
But if I ask a deeper question about what you're struggling with, then we get to the sincere part a little bit faster.
Yeah, and having an authentic conversation. And I've used that. I've stolen that.
Good. Keep
ever
going.
Since.
Steal it.
And I think I just think it totally. Yeah, it's that authenticity, and then it really just opens up the floodgates for value.
Sure.
To be injected in
Yeah.
the conversation, right? Otherwise, it's just chit chat.
Yeah,
You know?
I've found lots of times people say, "Hey Logan, how are you?" And I'll be like, "I'm awesome,"
Yeah.
and it kind of throws them off. People kind of stop and they're like, "Awesome? What does that even? What does that
Yeah,
even
what does that
mean?"
mean?
And sometimes it's true, and sometimes I'm making it true, right?
Yeah.
But I think when we just get out of kind of this, when we have patterns, those patterns don't always help us. And sometimes breaking those patterns gets us to better spots, both individually and in our interactions with others.
Yeah, totally. And I'm sure you've come to a realization of that. So walk me through your journey to get to that point a little bit.
Well, what a journey. What a journey. I think part of my journey is thinking I knew what I was doing and then
Yeah.
realizing I don't, and I didn't.
For sure.
And we don't have to go through all my career history, but I just thought I'd have this flawless career. In fact, I'm working on a bio right now, and I didn't know how to start this biography off, and so that's just a couple
Yeah.
paragraphs. And I thought I'm going to do something different, and so I started off and I said I used to think that maybe I'd be a famous politician, or that maybe I'd be the richest person in my network, or
Yeah.
and then I realized maybe I'm not those things. But that doesn't mean I can't be great
Yeah,
where I am.
totally.
And so I think that in some ways the failures or the obstacles I've gone through have helped me figure that out and helped me realize I can be authentic and happy and great where I am. And I don't have to worry about what I'm not.
Yeah.
On my LinkedIn, I talk about my title says something like a force for good.
Yep.
And I can be a force for good, whether I'm rich or poor, whether I'm employed or unemployed, whether I'm getting along with my neighbor or not. I can be a force for good in some way.
Yeah, no, and I think that's amazing. It really comes down to mindset shift.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Like we no matter what situation you're in, like you are fully in control of how you feel
Uh-huh.
and then how you react to the situation, right? And
Yeah.
you cannot control how others are going to react.
And
So,
I think it takes practice. Like it's so easy to say that in a podcast.
yes.
Like it's so
Yes,
easy
very
to say
much
that,
so.
right? But if
Yeah.
you practice and exercise that muscle, the way I'm talking about it right now, and I'm working on a publication and writing a book actually. And in that book, I'm talking about redefining success, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah.
if you could define success any way that you want, why not define it at something that you can accomplish?
Yeah, totally.
And so that's a muscle I'm learning to exercise.
How has it been writing a book? Like I imagine what that's like, but walk me
Yeah.
through that process.
It was kind of interesting. I had somebody from a publishing company come to me a couple months ago, and they said, Logan, I've seen you on LinkedIn for a while, and I think you have something to say, and we should put it in a book.
Yeah.
And so I started, I put together this proposal, and the proposal flew out of me. Like once
Yeah,
I
yeah.
started typing, it just came.
Yeah.
And then I started writing the actual book itself, and I got a few chapters in, and I think they're really solid. I love them. I can't
Yeah,
wait
yeah.
to read them myself.
Yeah, I'm stoked. I hope
So
we get a copy.
They're
We're gonna
really
get a
good
copy.
chapters. And then life hit, and I,
Yeah.
had some mental health things, and I'm not talking about years. I'm talking about within weeks, right? And like
Yeah.
some mental health challenges that reared themselves, some things at home, and like just stuff happened.
Yeah.
And I am having the hardest time getting back into it, right?
Yeah.
Like finding my momentum again.
Yeah, for sure.
So for me, writing this book is a really exciting opportunity and something I've always wanted to do, and it is also a challenge. And like it's hard to write an inspirational, motivational book when you're
going through it.
When you're going through it, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's okay. Like I'm just fine saying that's the truth today.
Yeah, well, and not only the truth, but like I think it's the perspective. Like obviously we like hearing from people that have let me back up. It's the hero journey,
Yeah,
I guess.
sure.
Right?
I am Luke Skywalker.
You're Luke Skywalker. No, 100%. But it is the hero's journey. Like you are going through it and sharing that and being open enough to say this is where I'm at, this is where I've been, and this is where I'm going.
Yeah.
Right? That's the catalyst, and I would say is very analogous to marketing in general.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Absolutely. I can see parts of that take place in my career, in my marketing career. So I agree with you.
Yeah, totally. Well, talk to me about the origins of of Logan Mallory. Talk to me about kind of where you started. You grew up in Detroit?
Yeah, I grew up in Detroit, just about 30 minutes outside of the city, right by University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Beautiful spot, loved it. My parents are still there, and like my heart yearns to be there.
Yeah.
If all of my dreams work out, I'll have a little teeny cabin in Michigan where
for sure.
no one can find
Ann
me.
Arbor is really pretty too.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's a lot of culture, a lot of great sports. Great
totally.
great school there, and so I grew up there. That's where I grew up. And like 6 days after high school graduation, I packed up and came out to BYU, Brigham Young University in Utah, and went to school. My whole life, everybody always said, Logan, you'll be great at sales.
Yeah.
And what they really meant was, Logan, you're kind of a nice guy, and you can sort of talk to people.
Yeah, you're good with people.
Yeah, I'm all right. So I went into sales and was miserable. Like I did okay. I won't say I was amazing, but I was miserable. And it took me a couple of years to figure out how to transition out of that, and I got into marketing.
Yeah.
And marketing's been the perfect balance for me. I have the responsibility of numbers and contributing to the business and having an impact without the, kind of the emotional burden of a sales quota every month. And so it's been a really good spot for me. What's kind of cool about how that all came around is I'm a better marketer because I spent a few miserable years in sales.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah, you have that perspective that a lot of people.
Yes.
And it should go both ways. I feel like if you're in marketing, spend like 2 weeks selling,
Right.
and it'll really like have your mindset shift, happen.
Exactly. Yeah. I wrote a LinkedIn post the other day and I was like, hey, marketers and leaders, when was the last time you did a demo? Right? Like
Yes.
you,
Yeah, I
you get
remember
on
that
that,
post,
you
yeah.
get on that call and you start to realize like, that's not as clear as I thought it was, or that is a tricky question to answer.
Yeah.
So though it was really hard for me, I'm grateful for those sales years. It's made the rest of my career a lot better.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I think I saw a post that you had said like your home and the home you grew up in like made you who you are. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, my like I think that's like literally the house and the place, right?
Yeah.
The city.
The physical
My
location. Yeah.
my parents built this house in Michigan in 1991. It's on a dirt road, and you can barely see the neighbors.
Yeah.
And the kids that lived next door, we just got muddy in the ponds catching frogs, and waded in the stream in the summer, and got lost in the woods, and would
Yeah.
just set out a sleeping bag. And man, I love it there. And so I think there is that element. I moved to this town in second grade, and it feels like from the minute I got there, I was really blessed with great friends. I had this group of guys that I spent most of sixth grade through high school with, and we called ourselves the Fellas. And I don't even know how it worked out this way. They were the nicest kids, like not perfect, but we kind of all lifted each other in being kind and fun, and I think we were I think we're the nice group of kids. And I love that group of guys. And girls. There were girls that we had friends.
We had
It wasn't
girlfriends.
just
It's
dudes.
fine.
Um,
That's so formidable. Like
Yeah.
friends, especially I think at that age, if you can get in a good friend group, which I think I feel lucky and blessed that I had a good friend group. I had plenty of other friends who didn't have friend group, or other family that didn't have good friends, and it's so formidable in those years and who you're going to become.
Yeah, I think we just it formed this idea that you can be cool and nice, and I like that combo.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like that's gone very well for you in the rest of your career.
I hope so. Is that arrogant to say I think
No,
I'm cool
I
and
don't
nice?
think
Because
so.
I do think
Yeah.
I'm cool and nice.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too. I will back that up. I will 100%
man.
back that up. I love that. Well, talk to us about Motivosity right now, where you're at.
Yeah, I love Motivosity. We're having such a good time over there.
You guys seem like it's like I want to come work for you guys.
Come hang out
on.
with us anytime. So I joined Motivosity about 3 years ago, and I had actually been a customer of the company before I worked there. One of the reasons I joined, our founder is Scott Johnson, and Scott started a company called At Task, which rebranded to Workfront, which was purchased by Adobe a few years ago for a very hefty sum of money.
Yeah.
And so, right or wrong, part of the reason I wanted to be at that role was to learn from Scott, right? And I think there's really amazing entrepreneurs like yourself and young people that just are killing it in the business world. I wanted to go learn from somebody that had done it, right?
Yeah,
that
for
had
sure.
taken their lumps, had the experience, and I knew I could get that from Scott. And then the other reason that I was really compelled to Motivosity is I've almost always been involved with really good products.
Yeah.
And reputable, honest products.
Yeah, you were at Workfront too, right?
Yeah, I did. I spent time at Workfront. I was at Log Me In and Jive Communications. I worked for a publishing company called Deseret Book for a while. So really honest
great companies.
Kind of boring companies sometimes, right? Like project
Like
management software
yeah,
doesn't
pretty
pump
boring.
me up, right?
Yeah, for
Business
sure.
phone systems, ends up I don't have dreams about selling business phone systems. So to go to a place like Motivosity, which focuses on helping companies build better cultures and making people happier at work, that was really cool for me, and all my dreams have come true.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. Well, and it's like a cool platform. Tell us like a little more about what the platform does for businesses.
Yeah, so Motivosity is a platform that again helps companies create winning cultures. And we do that really through two concepts. We do that through recognition and helping people feel appreciated and celebrated for the work they're doing. And then the second part of our platform is we really help build community at work. And so you end up having this place that instead of a tool built for HR or admins or executives, it's a platform built for employees, and it kind of becomes the happy place. It kind of
Yeah.
becomes the cultural heartbeat where people share the good things that are going on, where they recognize the wins of their team members,
For sure.
where they create interest groups and connect and plan events for whether it's game night or the road biking team or community service with your peers. All of that happens in Motivosity. And it's really fantastic. I was reading something kind of interesting the other day, and I'll admit I don't quote the U.S. Surgeon General too often, but the current U.S. Surgeon General, his name's Vivek Murthy, right? And this is the same institution, the same role that puts the warning on cigarette labels,
yeah, exactly.
right?
Yep.
And one of the things, he has 6 priorities right now. And there's 2 things that he's talking about. One is an epidemic of loneliness.
Yes.
Right? People are
Huge.
lonely, they're unhappy. And then he talks about, and I can't remember the exact word he uses, but he essentially says, like great workplaces, right? Like work is causing mental health issues.
Yeah.
And so he talks about how employers need to support people to, one, bring their whole selves to work, but also, two, to empower people to build relationships at work and to support those relationships outside of work. And that's what Motivosity does. Like, that is our goal, to solve isolation and to make workplaces better.
Well,
It's cool.
And I think that's 2, like the Surgeon General said, 2 major epidemics in the United States. And you've got people like, we had John Moore over at the Here Brotherhood
Love
on,
John.
and the work that they're doing to solve the loneliness factor, solve, men connecting in a bigger, better way, is so important right now. And like my own father's been heavily involved locally with different organizations, and in his more or less long career, like had many friends commit suicide. And that's in and of itself a major epidemic. And so and that starts not only with obviously yourself, but who you surround yourself with, being, solving that loneliness issue, because you could have everything in the world and still be lonely. And I think it's not only just not surrounding yourself with good people, but like really having that mindset shift internally, right?
For sure. And I think we've really set ourselves up for failure as a country, as a society. We've said, and actually, like, again, I have a lot of chapters to write, so the book isn't ready. That's what I'm talking about in this book that I'm writing, is that we've said this is how you achieve happiness. And what if we're completely wrong? What if nothing that most of us are aiming at will make us happy at all? And how do we redefine that? So it's a weird time out there and brutal. And I think we're all trying to feel this reset. And how do we work through this thing of being human at home, at work, in our own heads, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot to it.
And the pandemic totally shifted that. I've brought up 2 things that are going to get this podcast taken down on YouTube pretty quickly here. I think the pandemic shifted everybody's mindset.
Yeah.
And I think maybe in some ways bad, and in some ways good, right? But there needs to be like your own personal mindset shift into what makes you happy. That happiness isn't really necessarily an end goal.
Yeah.
It's like the present goal, right? Maybe talk to me about that. I know you've opened up a little bit on LinkedIn about like sometimes going through a rough patch, or you've talked about it just right now, or like how are you trying to like change your mindset on happiness?
I've gotten better at it. Like, I've gotten a little more clarity, and there is nothing like therapy to help with that, right?
Yep.
I was in a conversation the other day with a gentleman named Zeph. Zeph runs a podcast called the Emotional Man Podcast. And I actually, while I was talking to him in real time, I had this realization about my mental health. And maybe it's a helpful like analogy for people. So I'll say it again if you don't mind a repeat.
Yeah, for sure.
What I realized is that my mental health has kind of been like an escape room. And you walk into the escape room and you're locked in this room.
Yeah.
And you don't really know what's what. You know the theme maybe, but like you just got to start looking around, right? Yeah. And then you find a clue. And that clue unlocks one extra clue. or one door.
Yep.
And then you move to another part of the escape room, right? And
you
you're
just
kind
keep
of
going.
You just keep moving. And what if that's what our mental health and like, what if that's what life is all about? Like you walk in and you find yourself in a situation. And I think it's a little funny. We talk about the pandemic, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I could just as easily talk about 9/11,
100%.
right? And somebody else could just as easy. My cousin Roger would talk about Vietnam.
Yeah.
And somebody, you know, like you
there's always going to be
Yes.
the external factors.
Right.
100%.
And so we wake up in these escape rooms that are influenced by these external factors.
Yeah.
And
Gotta
part of
deal
it
with
is
it.
just look around and find the clue to the next room, and don't think you're going to solve your mental health. Don't think one clue solves your mental health.
Yeah.
One clue leads you to something else. So
It's a journey.
for me, that was started off with I had this health issue and I couldn't breathe. And I literally thought I was dying. Said goodbye to my
Yeah.
wife.
Yeah.
And didn't know what it was. But then that triggered me to go to a hospital and get things checked out.
For sure.
Which led to something else.
Yeah.
Which led to a new therapist. Which led to him telling me something that got me to start exercising. Which led
Yeah.
me to start drinking protein drinks.
Yeah,
which
yeah,
led
yeah.
me like
Yeah,
all
just
of these
all these
things.
shifts.
And it was just step by step. And the good news is I'm learning the pattern, which
Yeah.
I will have to use again in the next part of the escape room.
Yeah, totally. And I think in that podcast you talked about cycles.
Yeah.
Right? Like more or less breaking the cycle and moving on to the next cycle.
Yeah,
Right. And I think a lot of that, especially those that have dealt with severe mental health issues, you have to break some sort of cycle and make the change, but you have to decide to
Right.
do that.
Yeah.
Right. And that sometimes for a lot of people is the toughest part.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's one of the cool things that I like about my work right now is that we are thinking, how do you make people happy? They're in offices 8 hours a day, and so 33% of your day is in this building, this facility, behind this computer, and I love that we are trying to make that part better. Because it's a massive part of what contributes
life.
to our mental health and our life and our happiness.
Yeah, no, for sure. I saw,
How we treat our spouses
Yes.
when we go home.
Oh,
how we
very much so.
respond to our kids when we walk in the door.
Yeah, and I think I kind of chuckled a little bit because I remember seeing a TikTok that I don't know what it was quoting, but it was more or less saying that like the huge factor in our mental health is our friends at work. If we do not have good
yeah.
friends at work, then like it's extraordinarily detrimental to our mental health. And then there was some comments saying, yeah, it's because it's called trauma bonding at work. It's called trauma bonding.
I love that. Yeah, heaven help
Because
us.
we're trauma bonded at work. But like, I guess, and this gets us onto a good subject of like culture at work, at like a corporation.
Yeah.
Right. Like talk to us about that. Because like like at Scroll, we have a small team.
Sure.
So the culture is very like palpable. And it's also very much led by our team. Like Shane and I started the company, we had ideals and values we wanted to inject in everybody and in our clients and everything. And it's very palpable now because we've been together for so long. We have a very, very close, tight-knit team. We don't necessarily call them family though.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah,
Good for you.
So
Good
yeah,
for you.
yeah. We're like we actually really follow like the Netflix model of like our team. It's a performance team, right? It's not necessarily a family, but we do all of those things that I feel like everybody at our office is friends.
Yeah,
You know?
I think that's the important part. The question I ask is, would I want to hang out with these people on the weekend? Like, would I be willing to go to dinner with them and bring my wife and go to dinner? If I have to fly to somewhere for a trip or work, am I cool traveling with them?
Yeah.
And they don't need to be my family to do that. They just need to be nice, kind, respectable, fun people.
Yeah,
and,
totally.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're at that smaller stage, and Motivosity is 70 people, so it's not like we're massive. But what we find a lot with our customers is that they're in this phase where they're growing and they've had a really great culture.
Yes.
And then they start to see the risk to that culture that growth can cause.
Totally.
And so they're trying to formalize and protect the good culture that they have. Rarely does somebody come to us and say, man, our culture's horrible. Help us make it better.
Yeah.
We play really nicely in the We have
Our
a good
culture's
or a
great.
great culture.
Yeah.
We want to make it better. We want to formalize it. We want to automate some of the parts that can be automated.
Yeah.
That's where we play really nice. And it's cool to see that. It's cool to see that companies get it and that leaders care enough to protect what they've built.
Yeah, totally. Do you feel like culture does really come from the top down?
Well,
Or do you feel like it's carried by the team?
I don't think it's one isolated answer.
Yeah.
Right. I think leaders need to know that if they don't create the culture, it will create itself. I think that's a phrase that we hear a lot, right? Like if you don't create a culture, something will exist.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the frameworks, the guidelines. Somebody gave me a really interesting analogy the other day, and they were talking about something I don't normally talk about. They were talking about the idea of masculine and feminine energy. And that's not like male or female, but like masculine energy is organization and planning and preparation, and the female energy is a little bit more free flowing and love and creativity. And again, not a gender conversation.
Yeah.
But what they said in that was they said, the thought is the masculine energy is like the banks of the river. It's the walls that keep the river flowing in the right direction. And the feminine energy is the water, and it rolls and creates and moves and is beautiful. And so I liked that thought. And so I guess what I'm saying is both of those are good. You need some formalities, some walls, some guidelines around your culture.
Yeah.
And more often than not, that formality and structure comes top down. But you also need your people to care and to make it their own and to turn it into something. Motivosity's got a really great playful culture. One of our corporate values is stay young. And it's been about a year, we hired a guy named Tom. Okay. Tom came in, and within like 2 or 3 weeks, he was like, he has this channel called, I think it's Tom Teaches, and he has an entire wall in his house of board games. And on his YouTube channel, awesome. he teaches how to play games.
Board games. That's cool.
And so what he said was, "Hey, we need a board game night." And so on Thursday nights, Tom brings a bunch of board games. People bring their spouses and their kids.
That's super fun.
They bring snacks, and so like our top down culture is stay young, have fun.
Yeah.
And the bottom up culture is Tom runs games night. Tom runs game night, and we love it and support it and celebrate it and cheer about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I feel like, especially when that it becomes increasingly difficult as you grow to more or less, like as we scale, like our company's relatively, like as we're going to scale and get into maybe 100 plus employees, 200 employees, and increasingly bigger, right? It's hard to keep that same feeling.
I think the secret is to then support microcultures, right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is the game night or the site location or
individual team cultures.
Team cultures. We have a group that we work with, and they about 800 employees, and again, not a sales pitch for Motivosity, but this group of people found each other in one of our interest groups in the platform. And it was people who loved road biking. And so all of a sudden, you had these people connect and express interest in road biking. And they started going out, once a week. And the company said, man, we love that. That's a microculture. And they had people from finance and sales and CS, like people who would have never interacted otherwise.
Yeah, but they connect over biking.
Connecting and spending time. And so the company said, hey, we're going to sponsor your kits, your jerseys.
Yeah.
And we're going to pay for you guys to go do some races, because that culture of being connected and interacting drives better work, better retention, more happy employees. And so my challenge would be, if you feel like the culture is changing because of growth, what are the microcultures that you can empower?
I love that. I think that's like such a good piece of advice, especially for like, I feel like companies that have like more or less that struggling culture, like start there. 100%. Start there.
Yeah.
Like start individually.
Get some wins.
Yeah. Get some wins in for sure with the team so that you can change that culture for sure. Talk to me about, the role of like HR and people org in building culture. Because I feel like sometimes I think, at least outside perspective, is that HR interferes with that a little bit, right? Or it negates that.
Right.
It takes the human element out HR, human relations, right?
Yeah.
So maybe talk to me a little bit about that, especially because you guys like actively, obviously market probably towards HR people, org people, C-suite level.
You got it. Yeah, I think that is a little bit of the old school mentality was compliance, right?
Yes.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
worry about compliance and keeping things in line, and we need that. Like you need that within an organization. That doesn't mean that that a person in HR or people ops can't wear multiple hats, right?
Yeah.
You can be compliance when you need to be compliance, and then you can support culture when you need to support culture. I was in a meeting the other day, and we were talking about some changes, and they were changes in process, but they came with an emotional burden. These changes did.
Yeah.
And someone in the room said, "Hey, these are the right changes to make, but can we think about our people and how we help those people like work through this? How do we support them through it?" And so that's not necessarily like an HR perspective, but I really appreciated the way that person thought about it.
Yeah.
Because they were thinking about what needed to be done, but they were also thinking about the reality of how that would impact the people that have to do it. I think when we can stop and slow down and be a little bit more mindful about that, we can solve both problems.
And we can make much better decisions that
Much better.
impact humans.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Like I think I know you talked about recently, like Spotify's layoffs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really good example of obviously.
Dan,
they
you did
needed-
your homework.
Yeah, like that, like Spot, and I think in general, like Spotify, like amazing company. I'm a huge Spotify fan.
Sure.
But obviously, like there's been some shifts in business in general across the world, in finance, interest rates hiking, all sorts of stuff going on since post pandemic. It's going to be crazy to look back in the next like 50 years and have that this pandemic shift.
Right.
Anyways, long story short, we had talked about Spotify with their recent layoffs and how I would say like how different that is from, let's say, like even Twitter's massive layoffs, right? Like talk to us about the recent Spotify layoffs.
Yeah, they let go of somewhere around 1,600 people.
It's like 15% of the company.
15, 16% or so.
Pretty large
It's
portion.
not minimal, right?
No.
And I didn't know this when I made the post. Apparently that's that's Spotify's third layoff in 2023.
Wow.
So that does kind of change things a little bit.
For sure.
Listen, this is not popular. This is not a popular opinion. I really believe that each of us is responsible for our own career.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means we're on the journey with the employer that we're with.
Totally.
But that employer, that company has a job, and their job is to make money, and their job is to have good
Produce profit
returns
for their shareholders.
to have profit.
Yeah.
And sometimes that comes at our expense. And if we don't like that, then we should go start the next Spotify.
Totally.
Right? Like,
Totally.
like you are assuming some of the risk by being the person joining the organization instead of being the person creating the organization.
It's two different risks.
It's two different risks,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes I think that we like to beat up and villainize the person at the top. They're the ones that starved their family or took out the second mortgage. They're the ones staying up 24 hours a day. They don't get to check out at night. Yeah. And so I think it's unfortunate that we vilify the people that give us the job sometimes.
Yeah, no, and it's difficult, and it's to be honest, it's hard to know that until you're in it.
Right.
Like
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
It's hard to know like the sacrifice or the time or the mental health load or the financial burden.
Yeah.
Like the people at the top take on the majority of the risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah, or literally like personally become liable. Like I lose my house if if this doesn't work or whatever.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And so like part of me, I love and accept that reality.
Yeah.
Right. And the other part of me just hopes that those men and women who get to make the decisions when it needs to be the end of a run or things need to change or you have to do a riff, you hope those men and women are honorable and do the very best they can.
Totally.
And that doesn't mean they have to keep employing those 1,700 people because like they're the
Sometimes
ones
you
looking
gotta-
at the P&L.
Yeah.
And
Yep,
so
exactly.
anyway, I feel both as someone, I've never started a company, but I love capitalism.
Yeah.
And I have been let go, and I know
Yeah.
what that feels like. And so I can kind of feel both sides of those. I don't understand vilifying people when they're trying. And so anyway, I don't know if that's a helpful thought,
No,
but
no, I think so.
but like 5 months of severance is pretty good, and that's what Spotify gave. Like
Yeah.
5 months is probably an average days on market. Maybe not in
Totally.
this job market, but on average, that should get you, like, it gets you through Christmas, it gets you through New Year's. You have
Yep.
health insurance for 5 months. That either gives you some time to get
Totally.
creative, or find a new job, or I guess move in with your in-laws.
Yeah, if you got to do it. You got to do.
Right.
You 100%. You got to do it. You got to do. But
Yeah.
I know. I think it's like it's been a lot more, especially with like the recent even Jane.com shutting down.
Yeah, that was
Like it's
unfortunate.
such a like compare and contrast. Like literally giving your employees their last paycheck on the day and letting them go. No severance. No nothing. No
Yeah.
explanation. We're done. We're shut down. So different than. Guys, we had to make this decision, and I think that even the announcement was pretty
Yeah, I love
empathetic
that email.
to like from Spotify, and then also like we're going to take care of you as long as we can literally afford to take care of you.
Yeah.
And doing the best that they could.
Yeah, it's not, I don't mean to sound, I hope I don't sound like I'm downplaying the needs of those individuals. Like I
don't
know
think
what
so.
that is like
Yeah,
to be that terrified.
yeah, you've been there.
But we should appreciate when a company does what is good, and we should honor that and be grateful that they didn't do what other leaders have done, where it is just,
Yeah.
you're out, good luck.
Yeah, not
Not
like,
even good luck. You're
yeah,
out.
You're out, and it's completely inhuman.
Yeah.
for sure, and just it's tough, and I empathize because I'm a business owner.
For
and
sure.
I get that perspective quite a bit. Talk to me about being a manager versus a leader, right? I think we've talked a lot about leadership.
Yeah.
And I think and even in the two companies that we just gave an example of, I think one is very much an example of a leader, and one is just a manager. Right.
I think that when I've been really fortunate, and I've had great mentors all of my life. That doesn't mean every person in my life has been a great mentor, but
Yeah.
I've always had people watching out for me and guiding me along the way, and I am so grateful for them. Let me give you an example. I'll go back to Brighton, Michigan, and
Yeah.
growing up. In high school, one day they were doing some sort of an assembly, and it was a school-wide assembly, and they mixed students up. So they basically created a group you were with for a day. It was from all the 4 grades, and it was just totally random. So you were in this like new environment
Yeah.
for the day. And then they assigned 2 student leaders to a teacher and to that new group. And somehow I got put with a gentleman named Mike Messmore. And Mike had never been my teacher. We had never crossed paths. I think I was probably a sophomore, and he taught junior and senior classes. But I got put with Mike and ended up spending the day with him. And then I think afterwards he probably wrote me a card and gave me like a $5 or $10 gift card and said,
Yeah.
"Thanks for spending the day with me."
For sure.
And then I would run into Mike in the halls. And again, we had just had 8 hours together, but he
Yeah.
would ask me about things and check in on me. And then after a while, and this sounds a little weirder in 2023, but it felt more normal in 2020 or in 2000, he was like, "Hey, I'm playing racquetball. Do you want to go play racquetball today?"
Yeah.
And so I ended up going to the gym and playing racquetball with Mike Messmore. And then we would play every couple of months, and he would ask me about what I wanted
Yeah.
to do and my dreams. And then when high school ended, he would email me and send me an update and say, "Logan, here's what's going on in my life." And he would kind of like coach me. And so here's this guy. I never even had him as a teacher, even
Yeah, yeah,
after
yeah.
that. And he still took time to guide me and to be in my corner. And those emails from Mike were really valuable. It was a couple of years ago. I sat down to write him an email and typed one out and sent it. And I got on Facebook. And I'm not on Facebook very often. I got on and saw that Mike had passed away. And within hours of sending this email. And I read through the comments of his obituary.
Yeah.
And it kind of hurt my feelings, Mike. But I wasn't the only one. There were dozens, if not hundreds of students that said, never had Mike,
Yeah.
but I played racquetball with him, and he'd always checked in on me and sent me his emails. And so I realized I was just one of 100. But man, I never felt that way. And I love and respect Mike. And he gave me a really good example. That wasn't a manager. That wasn't just a guy doing his job teaching English classes at Brighton High School. That was a guy that knew how to mentor. And so I hope that I can work that way a little bit in my life too.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And I feel like, yeah, like even just, I'm just thinking back to like mentors that have taken their time in my own life and just made it possible. Like it is, there's such a stark difference between, I think we know what leadership is.
Yeah.
Like when it comes down to it, like we know what that is. And then we very much know when you're in it, we know when you have a manager versus a leader.
Right.
Right. And I truly believe you could probably bottle it down to like time and empathy. I think those two things and the combination of those two things are really what makes like a leader versus a manager.
Yeah, we probably overestimate ourselves when we are in the leadership role. But I think that like the way I analyze that when I'm thinking about the human that's leading me is, do I want to follow this person or do I have to follow this person?
Yes.
Right. And when I have to, that's a manager.
Yep.
When I want to, that's a leader.
No, I think that's a great, like an amazing distinction between the two. And and that comes from oneself, making that distinction.
It doesn't take much to be that leader. Like I think knowing a little bit about people's personal lives, knowing what makes them excited, having an interest in their growth, like you stack 2 or 3 of those approaches on top of each other and you're well on the path to leading instead of managing.
Yeah, totally. 100%. Talk to me about your faith a little bit. You share a lot about your faith on LinkedIn, which I think in Utah is probably a little more common.
Sure.
Versus other places in the United States, just because of the religion that I share in.
Yeah,
here.
absolutely.
And like, talk to us about that. Why choose to share a little bit more about your faith?
I made a post last week on Saturday night, or maybe it was Sunday. I was in church and I posted something about church, and somebody messaged me. They sent a DM and they said, "You know what? Thanks for sharing that. I really want to do that. How much backlash do you get for sharing your faith?" And you know what? I don't.
Yeah.
And now, I don't know if people are unfollowing me. I don't pay attention to that. And if they do, that's like totally
that's
cool.
Their choice.
Totally
cool.
Sure. I have a really interesting set of feelings about my faith. And some of it I am so grateful for. And some of it I feel like I'm working through. And when things get, this is a flaw, I'm not bragging about this. When things get too formalized for me, I tend to push back, right? Like, you tell me what to do.
You're a fun, cool guy.
I'm a fun, cool guy. You tell me what to do, and I start to be like, wait a minute. You invite me or encourage me or help me see the beauty of it, and I can, for sure. I love that. And so what I'm really grateful for in my faith, I'm really grateful for the ability to try again. And that all comes from believing in Jesus.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
Like the very center of Jesus for me is that someone loves me enough to forgive me when I screw up and I get to try again. And so like I can rally around that all day long with all of my heart. And it's also what I want my kids to know. I've got 4 kids, they're 10 to 5. And not too long ago, we came back from church and we're having dinner. And I said, hey guys, we go to church because we're going to screw up, right?
Yeah.
Like we go to church so that when we do something wrong, when we feel guilty, when we know that we've taken the bad path, we have an idea of how to fix it instead of wallowing in it and letting it make us spiral and make more bad decisions. Like we go so that we know who we turn to be whole. And I'm really grateful for that. And so what I hope when I share my faith on in social or on podcasts like this, I really hope that people know that I go to a church and belong to a faith that rallies around Christ. And to me, that is the beginning and the end. and the rest I think will work itself out.
Yeah, totally. I think that's amazing. I think especially like faith-based people in general, it like the hope factor, also the humanity factor is largely what guides us.
Yeah.
Right.
And unfortunately, again, I don't like a lot of the ways that we respond to things in 2023. And I talked about Spotify and vilifying the CEOs and the executives. Similarly, like, I get that there are people who do not believe in God or Christianity. And I like, that's awesome. Be whatever you want.
Yeah.
But I can believe what I want, and we can be civil to each other and kind and listen. I was talking to someone the other day. It was really fascinating conversation that is super into psychedelic drugs.
Yeah.
And I asked them, I said, how much of what you're doing is legal versus not legal? And they said, it's all illegal. And I was like, wow. And I was like, tell me more about that.
Yeah,
like
talk to me about that.
It's fascinating. Does that scare you?
Yeah.
Like, This is a wonderful person with a very good heart that is natural, like thinking more naturally than so I'm not even saying it was wrong. I mean, it's illegal, so it's wrong. But I didn't have to fight with that person.
Yeah.
Like
you could have an open, honest conversation with them.
It completely contradicts with what I don't even drink coffee. You think I'm going to do that? Like,
yes, yeah.
But that doesn't mean I couldn't listen and understand and like,
totally.
Wow, what led you to that? And what have you learned? And does it scare you? Like, I can learn through that person.
For sure.
And I hope that when I kind of bravely share some of my faith, that it opens up those dialogues rather than
become divisive.
You got it.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I think in our into what? Sorry,
I was gonna say, if you can share it in a cool and fun way,
yes,
then like that's good. And so hopefully my approach there is at least approachable.
No, I totally think so, and I think it's refreshing, especially in this age that we're in right now, where it is still incredibly divisive and just so much conflict in terms of belief and forcing one to believe one thing or another, or barriers to free speech and open communication, whether it be on social, whether it be on college campuses, whatever it may be.
Right.
Like it's really interesting. So very commendable to be very open and honest and transparent.
I appreciate it. I was at a conference once where Jewel, like the singer Jewel that grew up I think she's from Canada originally, and she was homeless and lived in her car. So she performed and spoke at this conference that I was at. And she talked about the idea of mindfulness. And she said, mindfulness is the amount of time from when you think something to when you say it. And I was like, oh, I can use that, right?
Yeah.
Like, and she said, if we can increase the amount of mindfulness, the distance between when we think something and say it, we'll say better things. And so,
very much so.
Maybe all of America, maybe all of the world, or just, if nothing else, the people listening to this podcast could take a note out of Jewel's book and be a little more mindful between when you think a thought and you verbalize it.
Yeah, totally. And and inject some humanity into that conversation.
Absolutely.
So talk to us about being a dad. I'm also a dad, but talk to us about being a dad and how that's influenced your career. I personally think like having my own daughters and obviously being married has like greatly impacted my performance and in my career and my job. It's also very much influenced I feel like my mind and my mindset when it comes to marketing for another business. But maybe touch on that a little bit.
I have wonderful parents, and I learned a lot from them. And yet I'm a train wreck. Like I think I'm an okay dad. Like CPS doesn't need to show up at our house, but I am really trying to figure things out.
Well, I think as we learn, and sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
It's interesting to me because as I have children now, I'm realizing like my parents didn't know what I thought they knew.
No
one does.
No
like
one
as
does.
you get older, it's like no one really knows what they're doing. We're all just trying our best.
It kind of blows my mind that for as disastrous as we all are as individuals, that we have a society and buildings and roads that work. Like, we're actually probably doing pretty good.
Yeah.
My kids are wonderful. There's 4 of them, 10, 10, 9, and 5. And so we kind of had like a little daycare for a while.
Yeah.
What have I learned from those kids? I think geez, I don't know, Dan, like where I would even take this one, except that a similar theme. If these kids can provide for themselves, be stable, contribute, then that's going to be great for all of us. And one of the ways that I think my wonderful wife and I are trying to do that is to talk to them like they're a little bit older than they are, right? And so we don't talk to our 10-year-olds like they're 10-year-olds. We use words and we use words that are bigger and concepts that are bigger. And we sit down once every couple of weeks. We have 3 chickens at my place.
Okay.
And the kids go sell the eggs throughout the neighborhood.
I love that.
And we make them go sell them. So they run across the street, they run down the road, and they sell them. And then I collect the money. And once every, 4 or 5 weeks, we'll sit down and we'll do money. And we'll say, okay, what's the pool? And then we'll split the pool by 4. And then we say, great, 10% goes to God. Pull out the tithing money. And then we'll say 40 or 50% goes into savings. Yeah. And I literally transfer it. I give them cash, and then I transfer it to their savings account.
That's amazing.
And then I say, great, 40, whatever's left, the 30 or 40%, you can spend on what you want, or you can save it for something you want to buy later, right? So the savings is college, car, house, and then the rest is, you want to buy a Switch for yourself or a guitar or Legos?
Pull it and save it.
Do it.
Yeah.
And we're pretty intentional about those kinds of things. We talk a little bit above them.
Yeah.
And I think
it's so practical.
I think it's a really easy thing to do. Sometimes one of my favorite things is I'll say a word that I know they don't know.
Yeah.
And they'll say, "What's that?" And I'll say, "That's a synonym for."
Yeah.
And like my 5-year-old knows the word synonym.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
Like we do it enough that she knows that I'm saying it's another word for
this word.
And so we just talk above them a little bit, and it brings them up. One other thing, there's power in habits with children. Yes. And this 5-year-old that I was just talking about, for a long time, she would get dressed for preschool and she would come to me and she would say, "Dad, do I look cute?" And I'd say, "Yes." And I'd say, "But you know what's better than cute?" And she'd look at me and I'd say, "Being nice and kind."
Yes.
And we did it over and over and over and over. And then one day she came up to me and she said, "Dad, do I look cute?" And I said, "Yes, you do." And she said, "But it's better to be nice and kind."
I love that.
Right?
Yeah,
and
those like words of affirmation. I do words of affirmation with my 4-year-old. And it's fun to get to the point now where she can repeat those back to me as I'm saying them. And she embodies that.
It feels the best. I had another one. Can I do one more?
Yeah, of course.
Last night, my daughter was my brother came into town from Pennsylvania, and so we were getting the house ready, right? Running around, making the bed, cleaning everything up, and the dishes had to be done. And my 10-year-old daughter was not giddy that she had to do the dishes. She was not thrilled with that. Yeah. And she was partway through, and then dinner was finished, and I was like, "Hey, stop the dishes. I'll take care of them after dinner. Come eat." And she looked at me and she goes, "I'm not a quitter." And I was like, yes,
I won. I won. That's the dad. I won moment.
That's right. Because for 10 years, one of the things I've been saying to him is Mallory's don't quit. And so when she was like, "I'm going to finish these dishes," I was like, yes, I have done it. Like, I'm okay. This is all going to work.
That made up for all of the problems for the last couple of weeks, you know?
Yeah. They're great. They're great kids. Yeah. And so I think, those aren't business lessons.
They're life lessons that apply to business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. Well, we're getting close to wrapping up, but I always like to add a question at the end of what is something you want to pass on to those that are either trying to come up in their marketing career, want to make a move into marketing. What advice would you give someone?
What I would tell people in any career, here's my professional advice. What I would tell anyone, and it really does apply to marketing, is be intentional and be specific. So often I'll have people come up to me and they'll be like, "I really want to get into marketing. Can you give me any advice?" And I kind of chuckle and I'm like, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
Like you don't get into marketing anymore.
No.
Right? Like Do you want to be a product marketer? Do you love the analytics and do you want to, or do you want to, the tools and do you want to be in operations? Are you a creative? Are you a demand gen person? Are you a copywriter? Like,
Get specific.
get specific.
Yeah.
And so I think people a lot of time. In fact, I see people on LinkedIn. They'll say, "I'm looking for a job in X, Y, or Z," and X, Y, and Z have nothing to do with each other.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
no.
no one can help you with that.
Yeah, you have to be very specific. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that people do very often is they'll say, "Hey, I'm looking for a job. Can you keep your eye out for me?" And I love people.
Yes.
I got 4 kids. I got a job. I've got church. I've got community. I have to exercise, right? Like I got to spend time on these things.
For sure.
But if you came to me and said, "Logan, you know Joe. Can you introduce me to Joe?" Or, "Logan, there's a job opening at company Y. Can you help me get in at company Y?"
Yeah.
I can help you solve that. Right?
Totally.
And
It's actionable.
it's
Like
actionable.
when you get specific, it then becomes actionable.
Right.
Generic doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
You know?
So I would say anyone that is thinking about their career and what they want next, niche it down a couple times. Niche it down even further so that you can ask exactly for what you want or need and get the help that people can offer.
Totally. I love that. Logan, thanks so much for coming on
Dan,
today.
it's been great to hang out with you. Can I
Yeah.
make an offer?
Yeah, of course.
You've got an audience here, and it's
Yep.
a small world.
Yeah.
And so, if there's somebody that I can help, if there's an intro that I can make, or a job post I can help promote, I hope people will reach out to me on LinkedIn and connect there so that I can be a resource. We need all the friends we can get.
Good. I love it. Well, thank you, Logan. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.